Good evening, Professor.
Good evening, Mr. Yanjarappa. How are you?
Yesterday's session was good.
Hmm.
I think this energy club, Professor, I think very interesting, and a lot of yesterday the professor has covered part of it on sustainability. I think important, and especially alternative energies, how India is doing, how the rest of the world is doing, how the technology transfer. I think one of the biggest challenges is that the technology transfer from the matured markets to developed markets. I think that's key. There is technology, but then of course it comes with cost, and something that countries like India cannot afford. But then if that happens, I think it's really good. So those things should be discussed. I think that's very important, I find.
Yeah.
So how frequently we organize talks, Professor, there in that Energy Club?
Energy Club, yesterday was the first session.
Okay.
Yeah, yesterday was the first session. Unfortunately, because so many things happening. But like I announced yesterday, I am in talks with one Mr. Anand Malligawad. I'm super excited. He's a lake conservationist. I think I mentioned this yesterday. He's very kicked up to sort of talk to our students. So I'm super excited to host him. I mean, it'll be amazing. I mean, he is the sort of person we should be looking up to, as a club. I'm saying those are the kind of people we need to reach out to.
Also, it's also interesting. Someone with very good knowledge in terms of energy sector, for example, thermal energy, nuclear energy, all these energies. Where do they stand? What challenges are there? How do we go ahead? I think some academician. I think maybe when I went to IIT Kharagpur, in 2011 as part of International Year of Chemistry. One of the gentlemen spoke very nicely about all the alternative energies. For example, from the sea waves, you can also get the energy. I think since India has so much seashore, I think it's also interesting to explore. So we should invite him also. I felt.
If you know anyone, let me know. We can work it out together.
Oh yes, I think I will.
Hi Bala. I think the speaker has logged in. Hi Bala. I think you're muted, Bala. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hi guys.
Hi. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening.
Welcome to the session.
Thank you, Rajat. Thank you.
Bala, we have around 39 attendees.
Okay.
I think it should sort of rise up in the next couple of minutes. So I would just give another 2-3 minutes if you don't mind. Yeah.
No problem.
Bala, meet MJ Yanjarappa and Manikandan. They both are part of our executive MBA program.
Hello. Hi. Good evening.
Hello, Mr.
Good evening. Looking forward to hear from you.
Yeah, excited.
Okay.
Bala, and this Mr. Yanjarappa is a PhD, so he is doing his executive MBA program with us. So,
very nice.
So yeah.
Very nice. I hope the session will be entertaining and not boring, to say the least.
No, it will not be. It will not be. Don't worry.
And unfortunately, light is not very good because it's been raining in Bombay for the past 12 hours.
Oh,
non-stop actually. So if I put on the other light, it will have a reflection in the camera. Yeah, on the screen. That's why I kept the.
No, this is okay, Bala. This is okay.
It's okay now. Yeah. You don't need to see my face. You just need to see the presentation anyways.
No, we need to see you as well, of course.
Enlightening is important. Okay.
Okay. Let's see how enlightening it is.
Bala, like all sessions, we will just wait for the attendees to become 50 and then we can quickly start. Others will start joining in the meantime.
Yeah. Sure.
So just 2 more to attend. So that's the normal number we go by.
Okay. No problem. Yeah. So everybody is doing it on a Zoom call, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi. Somebody has said good evening.
We are also we are also opening slowly for the students to come to the campus and attend.
Okay.
But still, people are very cautious about coming to the campus and not coming in groups and all that. Yeah. But the engineering students are coming in big gang. So I don't know, with the Omicron and all that, we don't know how it will pan out.
Correct.
But we are still figuring out how do we really manage all this.
Yeah.
Bala, you're also working from office or working from home? How is it?
Yeah. So right now, what we do is we go alternative days, unless there are meetings outside. As you know, in sales, there is always meetings which happen. And I still believe in the power of face-to-face meetings rather than online.
Absolutely. Bala,
so that is something that I always try to do because I think that's where the whole thing really works for us. So, for example, we had a recent meeting with Amazon and they said, okay, come to our office, and their office is in BKC. So we went that day before yesterday. So it just keeps varying, It was a Saturday actually. Yeah, not day before yesterday, it was Saturday. And they said, we are going to come to office. Why don't you also come? And so when they're according. So it's a function of what happens when, as you know, we are into that content sales module right now. So
absolutely. Yeah.
So that's where that works. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So we have touched 57. I think that's a great number. 58 as we speak. So Mani, the floor is all yours. Please take it forward. And Bala, before Mani takes off, thank you so much for making it, Bala. I mean, you didn't even blink an eye. You immediately said yes. It really means a lot for the club, for the Curiosity Club. Thank you so much, Bala.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Mani, all yours, Mani. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. On this midweek session, the 6th session of the Curiosity Club, making the perfect sales pitch. I borrowed today's quote from Jeffrey Gitomer. Great salespeople are relationship builders who provide value and help their customers win. It is my absolute honor and privilege to introduce you to today's speaker, Mr. Bala Iyengar, Chief Operating Officer, Helios Media. Mr. Bala has a professional journey that starts all the way from 1997. His close to 24-25 years of experience involves various critical roles, covering over some elite organizations like the Times of India, Sony Entertainment Television, Star TV, MTV Network, and Zoom Entertainment. He currently serves as the CEO of Helios Media. At Helios, his main job is to ensure continuing viability of the business, sustaining profitability, and looking for more new avenues of growth. His journey also includes some phenomenal milestones, like becoming the youngest vice president in the Times of India group of companies. He won the Order of Merit for exemplary performance. He was honored with Achiever Award in the MTV National Forum, and many more. He has a passion for trekking. His favorite authors, Wodehouse, Stephen King. He loves Batman, loves Bollywood, rock. His favorite rock bands, U2, REM, Springsteen. And from my little research, I was able to understand that Mr. Bala has such great understanding of numbers. He could put a lot of researchers and analysts under some very tough challenge. He's also someone who believes self-belief is the cornerstone of every success. And for people who joined in a little bit late, he also promised that this is not going to be boring. My fellow students, professors, and all participants, let's welcome with a huge round of virtual applause from all the way from Mumbai, Mr. Bala Iyengar. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mani. Thank you. What I will do is, I guess I can share my screen, right? So, so I will just get straight on to the presentation that I've outlined. I would like it to be interactive. I don't know how you want to do it. Whether you want me to go through the entire presentation and then you want to ask questions, or if there is anything you want me to pause and stop at any point of time, you can do that as well.
So Bala, how it works is you can continue with your session for 40-45 minutes, whatever is the flow, so that you don't stop on the flow of the presentation.
Okay.
Manikandan and Yanjarappa will take the questions.
Okay.
They will pose the questions to you. If you don't feel like answering, you have the right to say you want to give it a pass or something like that. Yeah.
Sure.
So we will take the questions at the end of it, so that you can continue with your questions.
Okay.
Will keep coming from the time you start your presentation. So we will select the best questions and we will put it out.
Okay, you will moderate it. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I will just share the screen. Just give me a second. Yeah. Okay, can you see the screen? Is it visible?
It is. Yes.
It is, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So when Rajan gave me the topic, the perfect sales pitch, I also wondered what exactly is a perfect sales pitch, because there is nothing called a perfect sales pitch. Sales itself, as much as it's about numbers and data and understanding of analytics and stuff, I still believe it's the art of enchantment. This is something that Guy Kawasaki wrote a book on. If you get time, please read it. I think it's mandatory reading for anybody who's in the sales field. Guy Kawasaki has written close to around 25 odd books. He's a venture capitalist now. So he's also on the board of Apple to IBM to Microsoft. He's a really huge guy out there. But please read that book. I would suggest that book gives you a lot of pointers as to what the magic of sales is all about. And it's all about the art of enchantment. So, I mean, there are only 4 elements, right, in sales. If you take everything out and leave out the jargon, and I don't believe in jargon at all, it's just 4 elements, which is the right product, the right place, the right time, and to the right person. If these 4 mixes are correct, the sale will happen. And all these 4 mixes need to be correct, and all these 4 mixes need to be simultaneously present. It's like an equation in chemistry, which Rajan and I studied together. So unless you get the right equation, even if one element is out, the composition won't happen, right? So all the 4 things need to be simultaneously present and should happen. So let's look at each one of them in a certain amount of granular detail to see where exactly this goes, right? So the right product. What happens in sales is that, people believe that you have to go pitch to multiple customers. And I'm talking about sales in any organization. It's not media or marketing or, any other company. It's something which people believe that you go and you pitch and you pitch and you pitch. And sales organizations have this tendency to take out call reports, right? To say that we need to do a minimum of 25 calls a week, 50 calls a week, 100 calls a week. Yeah, and ridiculous numbers at those, right? And from telemarketers to everybody else who's pitching is just pitching all the time. And what does happen with the pitch is that, it's the same standard pitch which goes out there. And the customer, if you're doing especially a B2B sale, which is what I have done all my life, is absolutely aware of what you're coming to pitch. He's what I call as informed customer, right? So if I'm going and pitching, say, MTV, or I'm pitching, say, Star Movie, so any of the channels that I used to sell, he is completely aware of what it represents in terms of data, in terms of analytics, in terms of audience composition. He knows it. I don't need to tell him that. Usually what ends up happening is we are given a standard pitch deck, which everybody carries. And the minute you walk into the room, you start pitching, okay? You just start saying, oh, this is a fantastic movie I'm premiering. This is a fantastic concert which is going to happen. This is superb. This is something great. And that's a standard pitch deck, right? Unless you customize it to the person that you're pitching it to, it won't work. And for customizing it, the primary requirement is to understand your customer, right? And the customer understanding just doesn't mean that, oh, I know what business he is into. Do you know the market? Do you know his competition? Do you know the problems at hand for the person that you're talking to? I will give you an example of Videocon, which I used to, which was one of my clients, which I used to sell to. And for Videocon, the competition was at that point of time from BPL. There was Philips. I'm talking about the early part of 2000. Samsung, LG were just entering the market at that point of time. The thing was that Videocon was not a differentiated product. Videocon was seen as, homegrown, born in India, built in India, kind of a premise. And people were not taking the product very seriously, and their sales were not happening to the extent that they should have. And that was basically because of the brand imagery more than anything else. The brand imagery was quite poor. What we did was, we customized a fantastic, even if I have to say so, presentation, which was customized for Videocon. And we created a product which showcased all his products in their full glory. Okay, be it a fridge, be it a TV, be it a washing machine, whatever products that he had, we customized a game show where all the audiences in the studio, to all the audiences at home watching it on TV, could actually go through the entire motion as they discovered the brands, as they discovered the uniqueness of the brands. It was almost like a walk-in, right? It was like what we call these days as a virtual walk-in. Those terminologies didn't exist at that point of time, but it was a virtual walk-in. It was almost like going to a showroom and somebody talking about the virtues of the whole thing, but done in a game show environment. And this was a massive success for them. We have got letters of appreciation from the people at, even from Venugopal Dut at that point of time, was the CEO, founder of Videocon. So, what I'm trying to say is that if you understand the customer, if you understand the customer to the extent that you know what his problems are and you can address his problems, you have to have a very deep understanding of it. People love to use terms as solution providers, but I mean, it's a very, half-baked understanding of things. So to be a solution provider, you really need to get deep understanding of the customer. It's just not going to be enough to, say, oh, I read a few articles about you in Google and I know what is your market share and I know who your competition is. No, that's not enough. To be a solution provider, it moves into an arena where you identify the problems that he faces and your solution actually, addresses that particular problem or problems as the case may be. Once you move into that role, eventually as a salesperson, the biggest gratification if you become a consultant. A consultant movement from a salesperson to being a consultant is a phenomenal move for anybody. And that means that you have that level of trust, you've built that level of integrity with the customer, that the customer, in this case, actually shares with you openly what his problems are and seeks your advice. That is a great level of understanding and listening as a skill which is involved. All of us, unfortunately, in sales, we are all taught by our companies that go there, pitch at the loudest volume and pitch relentlessly till you almost hammer the customer to buy. that's not what a consultant does. A consultant actually doesn't pitch, he listens first. And the minute that you listen with a deep level of understanding is when you actually transition the role from being a salesperson to being a consultant. So a right product needs to have a very deep understanding of the customer. You need to build that kind of a pitch deck, even if it takes a week or 10 days, but when you're ready, you're ready. And it's a practice skill to take a customer through the entire exercise of how you have identified the problem to how you're giving the solution. And of course, you're listening to him at all given points of time. I'm not saying every product is going to be right. There are rejections, like any sales process, it will happen. But if you have gone through this entire exercise and you have understood the customer, the chances and the probability of success is very high, is really high. It's not a standard 30%, 40%. It can go up to a 70% kind of a strike rate if you customize the whole thing. But yes, you really need to work a lot harder, listen to the people, read articles, meet people within the system. And I think that's what right product is all about. That's the first of the critical mixes, right? The second one is the right place. Okay, now here is what is happening, right? In terms of sales. The pitch that you're making doesn't happen all the time in a formal office setting. You wish it happens. It doesn't happen at times. It just happens, like you call the elevator pitches, which is where the great, ideas get sold to VC supposedly. So everybody says you do an elevator pitch. If you have seen Shark Tank, great example of elevator pitches that you're given 5 minutes to actually make a pitch for your idea, your presentation or whatever. It happens out there. It can happen that you just walk up to a customer and introduce yourself and try to derive some time out of him. But I would suggest that nothing like a formal setting, which is the ideal, but it doesn't happen. There are times when you are attending a conference and you see your customer there and you see your person who is also attending. Again, asking him for some time, meeting up with him or her, and taking a little bit of time outside of their, if they are a speaker or if they are an attendee, trying to find a little bit of time in the conference itself where you can pitch to a certain extent. The coffee shops, lots of people, you walk across and you see your customer at the coffee shop, people just barge into their personal space and start pitching then and there, and that's ridiculous, right? I mean, those things don't work. There's just a lot of, like I was sharing in the beginning of this call, a lot of it is online, unfortunately. And everybody uses their own Microsoft Teams, could be a Skype, could be a Chime, whatever that people are using, or Zoom, whatever that they are comfortable using, right? And they do an online presentation because people are working out of homes, that's the requirement. But like I said, the ideal right place has to be a formal office setting. It's when you are in a formal office setting, what does happen is that you are already in that mind space. You are in that space where you are going to take in because you are in your setting, you are in your formal, avatar, to put it mildly. Yeah, but that is the ideal according to me. The right place should be in an office setting, but doesn't happen. And these days it's rare that it happens that way, but I still believe in a face-to-face meeting over anything else. But given the circumstances as they are, you can't help it but to go through whatever happens out there. So these are the right places come mix, which again is a very important critical part of the whole thing. The right time, I cannot emphasize on how important this is. Timing, like somebody said, is everything, right? Everybody has an annual budget, they have annual plans. Even if you have the right product, even if you have the right mix, everything going, if you're pitching to a person without the right time in place, it's not going to happen, right? If it's in the middle of a year, his budgets are exhausted, he's not going to spend, he doesn't have the capacity to buy. So inclination to buy and how you get into the entire cycle of seeking, deriving, and benefiting the customer is very important, and it's a very critical part of the mix. The timing is, I mean, I've done enough and more pitches to clients, unfortunately, at wrong points of time. Diwali is a very big thing, right? In India, everybody says that during Diwali, people have massive budgets to spend in terms of marketing, in terms of, but what people don't realize is that annual plans get formed up very early. And if you're not part of the annual plan, even if your product is fantastic and you launch it during Diwali, the person is already committed to spending elsewhere. He's not going to pull that off and just going to give you the prime example of this. I still remember, and it's a fantastic one. So this was Kaun Banega Crorepati, right? The first year in 2000, Kaun Banega Crorepati launched with Amitabh Bachchan on Star Plus. And we were in Sony at that point of time. And I have met so many marketeers who later lamented to me that they missed the bus. Because Star Plus was not big at that point of time. It was a small channel. It was really small compared to Sony and Zee, which were very big channels at that point of time. Nobody thought Star Plus will be where it went after KBC happened. And KBC was a phenomenon. It ruled the 9 p.m. Star moved very smartly, took the 10 o'clock slot, took the 10:30 slot. And all the people who got hitched on to KBC Part 1 bought it at prices which were absolutely super cheap, right? KBC Part 2 was sold 20x of what KBC 1 was, right? And the right time, the people who bought it at that point of time and chose that kind of a product with that right kind of a mix really became the winners, and all the people who didn't buy at that point of time were all left, crying and crying. And I know people, very senior people at Hindustan Unilever, who were completely castigated because Colgate-Palmolive bought and they didn't buy. And for 3 years, Colgate-Palmolive bought it at an X price. And it was, the timing is virtually everything. The right time, the right pitch deck, and timing is very critical for people to make a success out of it. So timing is a very important part of the entire mix as you go by the sales process. This is something which is very simple. The right person. You have to pitch. You've got everything. You got a fantastic pitch deck. You got a fantastic place to meet up with. You've got the right timing. The annual budgets. Everything is perfect. But if you don't meet the right person, the sale is not going to happen. And what happens is there are various people. There are shareholders who will always try to prevent you from meeting the decision maker because they want to take the call. They want to ensure, and Rajan is laughing because he has been part of that process for what is called as an advertising agency. And they used to hate when we used to go and pitch directly to the client. So if you go to Britannia, Madison would hate it, right? Or to TVS. So because they would say that we are supposed to do that job and you guys are, leapfrogging us and going ahead of the process. So there will be enablers, there will be opponents. But if you get across to the right decision maker, you will know in an instant the way he talks or she talks and talks about the problems, the things that you are bringing to the table. It's going to either happen or not happen. I'm not saying the decision maker, just because you meet the right decision maker, it's going to happen. But the probability of a sale happening faster, quicker at that point of time, you come to know. And this is very, very critical. There are various people who pretend to be the right person. I've seen lots of clients. There are people who are junior who say, "Oh, this is my call. I approve of this. This is my call." But your research about the company needs to be so thorough and perfect that you know exactly who the decision maker is, who's going to take that call, and you go across and you meet that person. I remember during one of our early pitches, and this was during Epic. If you remember the channel Epic, which launched a few years back, and we were primarily launching the channel in the market as Helios. And Epic launched, and one of my people in sales went across to, I think, yeah, it was Bajaj, and they went across and met a junior person there, and the person said, "Oh, what a fantastic channel. This is superb. This is going to happen. I'm going to keep aside the budgets." And this guy came very happily back from Pune, right? He was like, "Oh, I met the right person. This guy has confirmed the deal. This is going to happen." And I knew who the decision maker was. So I said, I don't think you met the right person, but chalo, let's see if at all it converts into a deal. It didn't happen. So there are various people who pretend to be the right person. And in today's world, what has happened is that I was reading it somewhere. The number of shareholders in any decision making in a B2B process, which used to be 2, has gone to 6.5. That's the number of people that you actually need to meet, therefore. And that's the number of people that you need to convince to make one deal happen. And I mean, these are big decisions, right? These are multiple crore decisions. So it's in a B2B kind of a setup, there are multiple people, and you should know that these are all shareholders in that particular deal making. You can't obviously get all of them into one conference room. If it happens, it's fantastic. Doesn't happen that way. Somebody is traveling, somebody is elsewhere, somebody is in a remote location, whatever it could be. You have to get across to each person and convince each person at some level for them to, make the decision. And so the right person or persons are these days very evolving. But these four mixes are the critical part of any sales process. I mean, I cannot emphasize on, if you get these four mixes correctly, 90% of the time your sale will happen, right? If you get the right person at the right time, at the right place, with the right product, all these four mixes are what I call as a critical ingredient of sales. This will ensure that you have a good success ratio. You will make the product sell. Actually, he will have an inclination to buy rather than you selling it. I think that's the translation of what you do in the sales process, where the person wants to buy. Then you're only deliberating the value. There is no question of you selling. When you sell, then you try to lower the price, you try to give them discounts, you try to give them volumes. It doesn't work that way. If he has an inclination to buy, you would know in a second. And then you're only discussing the value. Okay, I can't pay you 15 crores. I can only give you 14 crores or whatever it may be. Then it's negotiation, because you have convinced the guy of the value. As long as the value proposition is sold, it becomes easy. Yeah. So this is in a gist of what I had to say in terms of sales. But I wanted to move into something which is coming up next, right? And I do not know what's going to happen. But I think it's a very important part of your students' life. It's a very important part of all our lives going forward. And we keep talking about metaverse. And this is like the catchphrase of everything else. And everybody is talking about metaverse in one go. What I understood from all the articles that I've been studying, and it's here. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's coming. What is going to happen in the metaverse is that, imagine there are virtual conferences which are happening. There are digital avatars which travel, which work, and which go for entertainment. There are purchase decisions which are enabled in that digital avatar in that particular world. And you have the new currencies, from NFTs to the crypto to everything else which is coming and flowing. This is what is going to happen now in that world, the metaverse world. How do you sell? Who do you sell? Who is your customer? What happens out there? Imagine, I was just discussing this with a client recently, and he said that, imagine a futuristic scenario, right? In 10 years' time or 5 years' time, whenever it evolves to that extent. The guy says, I am going to be in this conference in my digital avatar. Why don't you come in your digital avatar and let's go to Starbucks, which is again digital, and have a coffee. And you will pay Starbucks for that coffee. Starbucks is not going to take it saying, oh, you didn't actually drink the coffee. Where is the coffee? There is no coffee. You just ordered a coffee. It's a digital coffee and you are sharing with your avatar. And imagine that space where you're pitching and you're talking and the other guy is also out there. I was seeing when Facebook launched and rebranded all their services as Meta. And if you've seen that video by Zuckerberg, and he talks about this world, right? This augmented reality, this virtual reality, this VR handsets, this whole imaging which is going to happen, where people come, people meet, people interact. Who is the customer? How is the customer going to pay? What is the real estate that we are talking about out there? And somebody yesterday was telling me they bought a piece of land on one of the platforms, which was like a fashion street, right? And they bought a piece of land because they want to build a branded store out there. That fashion street purchase property has happened already. It's not been launched. The product exists, but everybody is so into it that people are running in with their cryptocurrencies and buying stuff out there. This is going to happen. So where are you going to sell? What is going to be the next moment in the metaverse? This is going to come and it's going to affect all of us in the next 2 or 3 years, I would believe. It's coming at a rapid pace. My daughter attended on, I forget the name of the platform, Roblox or something like that. It's a gaming platform that she's on to. She went and attended a birthday party with some group of friends in a digital avatar already in India, sitting here. Yeah, and that party was hosted in supposedly Hong Kong in a digital avatar. Imagine that. And now imagine in a space like that, where they are going and attending a party, and she is just 17-year-old. So is that party happening at a Pizza Hut, or is it happening at a McDonald's? Where is that party happening? And who is paying what money to host that party? And that's going to be the future of what is going to happen next, because for them, especially at that age group, these digital avatars are just an extension of themselves. They don't think of it very differently as to, oh, it's just an extension, oh, it's just a game. For them, it's reality. It is actually augmented reality for them. It has got, like I said, limitless real estate, right? I can create 15 fashion streets on any platforms. I can create multiple branded stores. It's absolutely out there. If you remember, in the early parts of 2000, there was a game which had come in called Second Life, which created a digital avatar. It didn't do well. It was actually the first one to come out in this alternative metaverse universe kind of a space. But this was in early parts of 2000. In 2003, Second Life didn't do well. What happened, if you look at the failure of Second Life, was they focused on the traditional business models and focused on brands. Okay, they went and told it to brands saying, okay, fine, these are digital avatars, people are coming, interacting. Why don't you get them to buy your t-shirt? Why don't you get them to buy Adidas? Why don't you get to buy a Coke? That doesn't work that way. This universe doesn't work that way. You have to have a customer centricity to it, where people discover things, collaborate, experiment with things. It's all out there. What does happen is if onto a platform, you get X amount of potential of audiences who come and go, that's what you market, because that data that you have is the new oil. You know exactly where your customer is. You know his spending capacity. Google knows everything about you, right? Everything about you is out there. Facebook knows everything about you. They know exactly where you are at. They know what exactly you are doing on your personal time, where you are located at that particular point of time. And that's what they sell. That's what they market. And I mean, there are various things which are coming into our lexicon. But what is collectively happening is this programming of things, of people, of events is going to happen at such a pace in the next few years that you will not know how you are going to sell. So, for example, is there going to be a possibility that you walk into a digital store of, say, Vijay Sales and buy what you need to buy, like a virtual walkthrough showroom? Yeah, of course, it's going to happen. It's happening already at a very fast pace. Are you going to then sell shelf space to each brand like it's happening right now? So you put the brands that you want on top at a high level, if you remember how the products are sold and placed in a showroom. Similar kind of a thing in a virtual space, virtual walkthrough. This is where the whole interaction is going to be. This is where the crowd is going to go. And if you're not equipped as a marketer, if you're not equipped as a salesperson to handle this or to understand this, you're going to be an absolute failure. This is here. This is going to happen. And we are all thinking of, conventional media, okay? So let's say television sales, right? As in you're selling a channel. The channel right now, where does the channel exist? How many people are watching cable? How many people are into what we call as the cord cutting, right? People don't watch conventional televisions anymore, especially all the digitally equipped households don't watch conventional TV. They want to watch whatever they want to watch at their given point of time. So the whole thing of programming for customers has gone out of the window. If you want to watch Sun TV and you're watching any particular show of your choice, you'll probably watch it on Sun Next at whatever point of time that you want to see, whenever you are free. You don't need to be programmed. Earlier, it used to be, 9 o'clock, I have to go and see this show. Doesn't work that way. You see the show at 3 a.m. No, that's what the unlimited capacity is of this whole world, which is moving, which is what we are fast moving into. And this is where we have to understand this. right? As the processes evolve, as customers evolve and they make their choices, it's all about being customer centric, because the customer at any given point of time is making these choices, and he's making these choices in a blink of a second. Doesn't take him much time to watch something on Amazon, then flick through to Netflix, then come back to Hotstar. He's making these choices continuously. He's getting fed with these choices. He's continuously making these choices. Similarly, in this metaverse, those choices will be there. Those choices will be limitless. Those choices will be multiple. And if a marketeer doesn't understand it, if a salesperson doesn't understand it, there's going to be a huge problem. And you'll have to program for the future. This is where I believe the whole crux of the matter lies in the next 4 or 5 years. This is where it's going to come to a head. In conclusion, what do I say? It's an uncertain future, right? Nobody can predict the future. Anybody who says I can predict the future is just being an idiot, right? Even Mark Zuckerberg says, I don't know what's going to happen next. We are all learning and unlearning. And that's a very important thing, because what we were taught is not applicable anymore. I cannot teach you about how to sell anymore in a world which exists like that. The paradigms of doing business are shifting at such a pace. Imagine in Japan, they have discovered data which moves at a speed of 320 Tbps. That's extraordinary space, right? That's the fastest ever of data which they have discovered. And I mean, what all things can you do? I mean, there is no buffering, there are no problems, there is no network issues, there's nothing. It just moves at a pace which is so rapid. Why? What was the earlier part of the version of data, right? The earlier version of data was, it used to have buffering problems. People used to download things. Who downloads anything anymore? The whole point is, with the speeds that you're getting, nobody downloads anything. People are watching at whatever point of time you can watch. And there are no buffering problems, even in India, which has got fantastic speeds, all thanks to Jio and how they crashed the data prices to whatever that they did. Fantastic with the fiber optics which they were laying. Superb. But if you just come back to the whole thing, right, where are the fundamentals? The fundamentals remain the same. At any heart of the sale, the fundamentals remain the same. What is your product? What is your mix? Who is the person you're selling to, and where you're selling to at what given point of time? Those fundamentals don't change. It's only reapplication of those fundamentals into universes like those. It's reapplication of fundamentals into digital verses that we are going to see, but the fundamentals remain constant, and those things will never change. I think I'm done with that. I hope I could come across clearly as to what I think about the sales process and what's going to happen next. Any questions, any clarification, happy to provide.
Mani, you can take the questions.
Yeah, I think me and
thank you, Mr. Bala. We have a couple of questions. We will.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. I think one question is basically from Mr. Sarup. Since you are from media industry, I want to know how important animation, visual effects, creativity play in all your data ads focused for defining the 4 right statements for all your customers during approach to them.
Yeah, I think it's a very important question, and it's very important. What does happen is that we do not pay enough emphasis on what kind of animation that we use, or what kind of virtual effects that we give, what we call as the AV, right? The audio video presentation of things. People love to see AVs. It's very engaging, because you go into into a conference room and you say, I want the sound to be on. I'm going to show you an AV. You darken the room, everybody is attentive. Okay, and you make a short AV. The presentation looks really kick-ass, and people love to buy it then. People become more engaged. So that's a very important part of our presentation skills, especially in media sales, for sure. Because what you are selling, at the end of the day, the customer is also your audience, right? He also is consuming you at some level. I remember when I was in Star Movies, and we were selling The Lord of the Rings for the first time, the trilogy, as a premiere, right? And I knew the guy at ITC, who was my client in Bangalore. was a huge Lord of the Rings fan. All I did was walk into the room with a couple of merchandise, gave it to him, and he said, when are you premiering it? I said, it's happening next month. He said, I'm buying it. You know, there is no sale happening. I said, I have got a fantastic AV. He said, you're mad. I've read the books. What will you tell me about Lord of the Rings that I don't know? So I said, okay, here's the merchandise. Thank you very much. I'm sending you a deal letter. Please sign it. And it happened like that evening. It happened. Just bought it. So, you know, like I said, knowing your customer, knowing what he likes, dislikes, very easy to make the sale. But yes, all your equipment in terms of your AVs, in terms of your animation, in terms of your presentation, all of them are very, very critical.
Sure. Thanks, Bala. I think we have one more question from Mr. Varun. Please advise, how important do you think it is to build a personal relationship with your customer rather than just a professional one in the Indian market, which is more often a relation-based market?
Absolutely. I think relationship is key. Like in any business relationship you have, over a period of time, you nurture it. You know, we media people have got a very bad reputation. We entertain, we take people out for drinks all the time. It doesn't happen that way. Nobody wants to meet you anyway these days. It doesn't happen. But yes, building, see, I will tell you what, when you talk about having a relationship with a customer, it's not enough for you to just know his likes and dislikes, right? You should be able to engage with him outside of your business work. You cannot keep on talking with him about how well your product is selling, how well my product will fit in. Doesn't work. You need to have a little bit more understanding. I am not saying, oh, how is your daughter doing? No. Whether your son is doing well in school. I'm not talking about, you know, false things like those. But just to have a very good understanding. For example, there was a client of ours who we used to bond over bikes. I was a huge Enfield fan, and so was he. And we used to just talk about bikes, and it just accidentally discovered that both of us have a passion for bikes. And at that point of time, I used to have a Thunderbird, and we both went on a long drive. I mean, he came on his bike, I came on my bike, and we just drove all the way to Lonavala, had a coffee and came back. And that was fantastic bonding. That was fantastic relationship. But you discover those things, you know. I mean, people do sneaky things like walking up to the secretary and saying, hey, what does he like? You know, people ask stupid questions like those in order to build a relationship. People see through it in a second. Relationships happen if you vibe. And that vibe is very, very important. If you start vibing with your customer, you will know it in a second. Then you build on that relationship, and don't make it false. Don't make it seem as if you're desperate. Make it very natural. Let it come out on its own. And in the Indian context of things, you have founder owners, you know, when you go to Gujarat, where lots of my clients are, they're founder owners and they are decision makers. And, you know, one guy, you know, what happened was in Gujarat, they banned pan masala. Okay. And this guy was a huge fan of pan masala. He used to have pan masala. So when I went to meet him, the first thing he asked me, I hope you're not bought me pan masala. I said, no, why would I buy you pan masala? Opens his drawer and shows there some 50 packets. Saying every media guy coming from Bombay is buying 10 packets and giving it to me. Saying, oh, in Gujarat it's banned, please have pan masala. Can you imagine the desperation that people go into? Yeah, but he said, I buy it here, please. I got dabba and dabba at home. You think I can't source it? Why would you presume such things about me? No, but these things happen. In order to build that relationship, people go to ridiculous extents of doing these things. I know of a guy who was so desperate to do a deal with a client, the client was avoiding him. Somehow, he bribed his secretary. And there's a true story, okay? He bribed the secretary and found out which flight he's taking on which day, okay? And he was taking a 7 o'clock morning flight from Bombay to Delhi. He booked himself on that flight. He went and sat next to the client. He asked somebody else who was sitting next to him, saying, please, can I sit here? And then he made a pitch in the flight for 2 hours. What will the client do? He can't access his phone. He can't say, I am busy. He can't look elsewhere. He had to listen to this guy's pitch for 2 hours. You think the product got sold? No. The client would have hated it. Being confined for 2 hours for a non-stop pitch. Imagine. So people do all these stupid things in order to build relationships, but build it in a smart way, build it in a casual way, be yourself. You will vibe with the client. Yeah, relationships are key.
Thank you, Bala. We have another question from Devapriya. Do you believe that the sales would become extinct and it will be at marketing after what your last few slides said?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's already becoming extinct in the way that we know of it. There is this concept called programmatic, right? It's the latest terminology in the media planning analytics world, right? Everything is done by machines. Everything is done by algorithms. You don't need people. You don't actually have an interaction. There is no person selling from Google, if you know what I mean, right? You just buy stuff on Google. You just buy things, buy audiences. You just feed in. This is what I need. This is how much money I'll spend. That's it. It will give you everything in one go. There is no negotiation. There is no person. It's all by a machine. It's happening. It's happening very rapidly, whether it's happening on Google, whether it's happening on Facebook. It's happening worldwide. Yes, but there will always be a sales interaction in a B2B setup, for sure, especially for large value items. Imagine you're selling an aircraft. You can't have an algorithm selling it for you, right? If you're Boeing and you want to sell it, you have to have an interaction. The CEO of Boeing makes a pitch directly to the CEO of Air India or CEO of Indigo, who else, right? Those interactions will exist. It depends on the industry that you're coming from. When you talk about the participativeness of sales programs, it will change. Yes, there are certain industries where there will be no requirement. Media, for sure, unfortunately, will not have great requirement because you can just buy things on an Excel sheet. You can just figure out your budgets.
Yeah, I think even the apps are going to be, playing a key role here because
Absolutely.
most of the Sure.
Absolutely.
Thanks. And the next question is from Ramya. Does the metaverse will work in the real estate sales segment in India?
100%. Yes. Okay. So a good friend of mine is in the real estate sales in Australia. Okay. And what happens in Australia is going to happen in India. It's just a question of time. So in Australia, especially during the COVID times, right? And Australia, as you know, was landlocked for a very long period of time. And Australia, the biggest sale in Australia, apart from tourism as an industry, is real estate. And the Chinese buy real estate like crazy in Australia. Like the Chinese buy everything that's available. Okay. And the Chinese they buy it out of China and then they come and they build their houses. It's that much advanced. And they do the entire real estate sale on a virtual video. You take a video, you shoot a product, you say, this is the area that I'm selling. This is the mall which is next door. This is the school which is next door. This is the hospital which is next door. You sell it online. And those guys bid for it and they buy it. So 100% real estate in the typical sense, conventional sense of real estate in a metaverse is going to be one of the biggest things which are going to happen. It will completely transact from say, what we see as a virtual tour to seeing a house and seeing the bedrooms or seeing the lawn or the balconies or whatever that he's got. It's all going to happen in a virtual tour. It's going to sell, for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Varun. I think we have another question from Mr. Varun. When the companies at downfall, sales executives are the first one to be slaughtered. How do you think from a sales guy perspective, should such situations be handled?
Unfortunately, very true. If a company has a downturn, the first people to be sacked are the sales executives. Because it's directly attributable, right? When you're talking revenue, you're talking sales performance. And when you're talking sales performance, it's sales executives, right? And the juniors are the first to go. Then it goes to middle management. Then they go across and get the seniors. I have seen personally a few cases where my bosses were sacked and I was not. It happens that way also. But it's a reality. Pressure in a sales job is a reality. If you are working in sales, you can't shirk away from pressure. But yeah, you do your job diligently. You do your job with a lot of effort. You keep on learning on the job, and you wish for the best, because if the industry is out, what are you going to do about it? Right? I mean, where is Kodak right now? Or Nokia right now? What happened to those great companies?
Yeah. True.
Yeah. So it just, you don't know what technology will do to you. It's complete uncertain times right now.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mr. Bala. I think we have another question from Mr. Srinivasan. How to influence people and win? Is there any book titled,
How to, the art, I think there's a book, right? The Art of Winning People and Art of Influence. There is a book like that. Yeah, I'm sure there's a book like that. But like I said, how to win over people. I think firstly, if you're going to get into the sales world, you should have a lot of information. You should be well read, I would say. You should be well read. You should be aware of all trends which are happening. You should know what is happening in the world at large. You cannot say, I will only sell my product and I will make a killing out of it. It doesn't work that way. You should have the skill of conversation. You should have the skill of making the other person laugh with you. You should have the skill of winning him over that way. I've always found humor to be a very potent tool. Humor bonds people like nothing else. The minute you can laugh with your client, you're getting into a bonding which is unbelievable, right? It's one of the most potent tools that you can have. And that doesn't mean I walk into a client's office and say, hey, I'm going to tell you a joke. Not that level of, actually, a boss of mine said this to me. Can you believe? He said, I think it was in MTV. He said, you know what? This person is very fond of jokes. Every morning, I send her a joke on SMS. So I thought the joke is on you and you are the joker in our world, because I mean, imagine every morning you're opening your phone, and these are the days of SMS, WhatsApp, and you're seeing one joke.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Absolutely. When someone is just stressed, I think a good joke also makes a big difference.
Yeah? Absolutely, absolutely. In today's time and age, you can just come into to a meeting and you can talk about the traffic outside. You can talk about the parking issues that you have. You have various levels of bonding. And if you know, for instance, what the client's likes or dislikes are, you can definitely talk about those. It's easy to bond if you are a good conversationalist. That's the skill. That's something that you develop over a period of time. When I was in sales, I had two different people that I used to always look at, and they were my group heads. Okay, in Times of India, first job. One guy was very straight-jacketed. Wear his coat, wear his tie, go for a meeting, polished guy, and make a formal presentation. Okay, today I have come to sell you this. Get into the pitch, go through it, finish the presentation, shake hands, finish his coffee, leave. The other guy had his tie here, was completely laid back, used to just waltz into the office, meet everybody, have a joke here, there, have a corridor conversation with 10 people, and then walk into the meeting and, say, oh my God, what a day, I am so exhausted, and just have a random conversation about some random event which happened and make some random jokes about things. And the client will just have a blast. Which is the person as a client you would like to meet? The second guy, not the first guy. The first guy is boring. The first guy is probably doing a great job, but he's damn boring. So you need to cultivate that level of ease, that expertise of conversation, of where it just flows like that. I think that's the most important skill that you can have.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think we have one basic question from Mr. Venkatesh, saying that as a sales profession, is it necessary to have depth knowledge about the products?
Absolutely. Absolutely. About not only your products, also the customer's products, the customer's requirements, whatever it may be. You have to have it. There is no running away from that fact. Sales is 90% preparation. If you walk into a meeting unprepared, that guy will make you out in a second.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's also competitor's product, and the whole it makes the product more advantageous. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Thanks. I think the last question from Mridula. When we see in medical field, the critical care medicine marketing is different from other marketing. How do we select the strategy?
Okay, thankfully, a friend of mine used to sell stents, so I can answer this question. Otherwise, I would have been at a loss to. Okay, so what happens is when you're selling a medical equipment, right? Imagine you're selling an X-ray machine, or you are selling an MRI machine, or you are selling a stent. Again, you are selling to a very informed customer, whether it's the head of a hospital, whether it's the head of that particular department, as a doctor, as an MD or an MS. Those guys are extremely well informed. There is very little you can educate them about the differentiation of your product. And these products invariably are identical, invariably have the same kind of features, invariably have got very same kind of benefits that they probably one or two differentiating benefits here and there, but invariably they are the same product. How is one stent different from the other stent? It is just a pipe, right? It has got the same level of, crew. And how do you sell it? How do you market it? And in the medical field, unfortunately, what happens is then you get into this unfortunate thing of conferences that you send these medical doctors to. You send them to all these tours. You do, stuff for them. You take them outside. Unfortunately, there is a lot of, I won't call it a bribe, but it's somewhere close in that vicinity of things, just to sell your product. So you say, okay, I will send you for this. Oh, this fantastic conference happening in Japan. I'm going to sponsor your trip. That's what happens. In the hope that he will buy your product, recommend the product to the hospital, or he's the head of department, then he'll buy the product or whatever. Medical, again, I would say is a very difficult sale, especially all the MRs. And one of our friends became an MR and he quit in 5 years. He was lousy at his job, but it's a very, very tough world. Medical reps have got a very, very tough life. And I've seen them waiting at doctors to meet them for that one singular appointment at 9 o'clock in the night, to early mornings that they are waiting in the queue outside. And it's a very, very tough life. Yeah. But again, in-depth knowledge about product is a must, whichever field that you may be in.
I think at the end of the day, the doctor prescription, what it works out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Bala. I think we will take one more last question from our Professor V.V. Rajan. Professor, up to you.
Thank you, Anjarappa. Bala, very insightful session, and thank you so much. We have always spoken about a lot of things, but never had a very formal sort of setting between us. But I think today, I could actually see the way you spoke. I could actually feel the sort of body of work you have done over the years and how you have built your career. Fantastic, Bala. Really proud. My question to you is, sales is something which I think I could never fit in. Okay. I was always on the other side of the business. Okay. As a media planner, advertising agency and stuff like that. It's a really, really tough job. And I, for one, I'm just setting it so that then my question will come. I, for one, always used to spend a lot of time with the salespeople, people like you, who used to come and meet me and, try to discuss about new properties and new things coming up and all that, simply because I know it's a very tough job to sell what they are trying to sort of conceive, from the media point of view. So my question to you is, number one, how tough it is to be, a salesperson? Are salesperson made? Is it there inherently inside you? Or is it quite easy to become a salesperson if you have the right kind of mindset? I really have been dabbling with these kind of questions because I could never become one. It's very tough. I know it's a very tough job.
Yeah, it is a very tough job for sure. And many people believe that salespeople are made, they can be groomed. But I have always seen that you have a flair for it or you don't. I cannot make you a salesperson.
Right.
I may be the best salesperson in the world, but I cannot coach you. I cannot teach you. You have to have a flair for it. And I remember an example again, because I like my anecdotes because it makes it easier for people to relate to what I'm saying.
Love them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was in Star and there was this person who was promoted and she came from data and research into sales, and she was put in my team. And this was prior to me joining Star. So I basically inherited her. Good person, very in-depth understanding of data, extremely good at data, but very poor in sales outside. She didn't know how to talk. She only could crunch numbers. Right. And she was a complete background office person, and you put her in the forefront. She couldn't make a presentation for the life of her. She could write the presentation. She could put in all the critical information that you want, but she used to freeze in sales meetings. How do you sell? After a year, I told her that please go back into data and research. I will recommend you very highly for data and research. She was like, oh, is it one back foot for me? I mean, am I going back? Well, I said, not everybody can be a salesperson. Yeah? That's the reality of life. I can't be an artist. I'm lousy at drawing. I will draw stick figures if you ask me to. But does it make me a bad person? No, it's a different skill set I have. People need to identify their talent, their skill sets, and then get into sales. I would say, because sales is an extreme pressure job, firstly. Extreme high pressure. There are nights you will not be able to sleep. There are nights you will have fights with colleagues, fights with your bosses, with everybody else that is in your life. I have personally woken up for a 9 o'clock presentation and finished the presentation at 4 a.m. in the morning, worked from 4 to 7 and done a presentation because I was not happy with the presentation the way it was. If you don't have that passion for the job and the flair for the job, you can't do sales. I cannot train a donkey to become a horse. Doesn't happen. I cannot do it. It just, a person has to be a horse, is all I'm trying to say. Donkey has got other uses. I'm not trying to deride a donkey, but everybody has got their own uses, right? Can't change it. I cannot do it. So Rajan, to answer the question, yes, sales is very, very tough. And I think salespeople can't be made. You have a flair for it. You have a talent for it. And you have the passion to do it. Get into it. It's an extremely rewarding career. At the same point of time, a lot of people fall by the wayside. You hear a lot of heart attacks which happen in this field. It's an extreme high stress job, from traveling to meeting people to preparing. It's crazy hours for sure.
Thank you, Bala. Well answered. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we'll move to the vote of thanks. Thank you so much, Mr. Bala. Before I conclude today, thank you all for attending today's session. It's indeed been a pleasure hosting you all and hearing some incredible insights from Mr. Bala Iyengar. On behalf of Dayananda Sagar University, the Dean, the club committee members, our faculty and students, we would like to thank you, sir, for sharing your valuable experiences with us. Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, I think it's been a great experience. Thank you so much. So friends, our next session is planned on Monday. The speaker is Sai Ranjan Mishra from Urban IQ. So on marketing technology in today's times. So please join us and stay tuned for more updates. Take care and stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Bala.
Thank you so much, Bala.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Janjarappa, see you. Imtiaz, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Take care. Wait, well, I think 2-3 minutes late. It's okay, but I think it went.
Yeah. Thank you.